In 37 BC, an arms deal was negotiated in the town of Tarentum. It involved Marcus Antonius and Caesar Divi-Filius. Surprisingly, it was overseen by Octavia Verina, wife to Antonius and sister to Caesar. At this seminal meeting, Marcus Antonius traded 120 of his warships against the promise that his brother-in-law would deliver to him 20,000 as yet-to-be trained legionaries for his conquest of Parthia. In the almost 5 years since he and the young Caesar had defeated Brutus and Cassius at Philippi, avenging the murder of Julius Caesar, Marcus Antonius had gained no ground in his readiness to invade Parthian territory. But how was Marcus Antonius to rectify his predicament? In Italy, Caesar Divi-Filius held all the cards. The Roman people might have despised Caesar Divi-Filius as the catalyst for their suffering and starvation, but Antonius had been absent from Rome nearly 5 years now. Better the devil they knew. By the time of the signing of the Treaty of Tarentum, it is likely that Marcus Antonius would have felt somewhat out of place on Italian soil. Politics in Rome had morphed dramatically since the Battles of Philippi. The younger generation, for whom Caesar Divi-Filius was both parent and poster child, was now in control. Rumour, innuendo, and scandal were treated as fact, while Caesar's political opponents were dutifully sacrificed within the sanctified walls of Rome's holy temples. Julius Caesar was revered as a god whose unchallenged authority over Rome was directly proportional to the military might that underpinned the god's son and heir. And to make certain that the adopted Gaius Octavianus was universally accepted as the chosen instrument of Caesar the Divine, the Divi-Filius employed a powerful retinue. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, a quite capable military man, served as Caesar Octavianus's muscle. Caius Tunius Maecenas, a clever orator and rhetorician, became his mouthpiece, and Livia Drusilla was the woman through whom the country bumpkin could legitimize his offspring, thus attaching his bloodline to the last bit of Rome's old nobility. And even Octavia, Caesar's sister, now acted as diplomat, mediator, and arms negotiator. By virtue of his marriage to Octavia, Marcus Antonius must have been aware that he too would be regarded as a mere member of the faithful by the people of Rome. He would acquire no celebrity in the shadow of Caesar Divi-Filius. What could he do to regain his stature as the senior triumvir? With only a fleet of ships, Marcus Antonius could not defeat Caesar Divi-Filius, who had the greater number of soldiers, nor could he be certain that any among Rome's military would even engage in another civil war given their principled stand at Brundisium. To win the hearts of the Roman people, and to re-establish his personal dignitas and reputation, Marcus Antonius desperately needed to conquer Parthia. In punishing the Parthians for the death of Marcus Licinius Crassus, and by bringing much new territory and expanded trade to the Roman Empire, Marcus Antonius saw an opportunity to surpass even the fame of Julius Caesar, thereby deflating the divine narrative being foisted on the citizens of Rome by Caesar Divi-Filius. But invariably there was some roadblock. In the aftermath of Philippi, he had been hindered by having to reorganize Rome's eastern provinces, which had been devastated by the tyrannical cruelty of Cassius and Brutus. Citizens had been waiting to be freed from illegal slavery. Kings and satraps loyal to Antonius had to be appointed to restore the balance of power, and brutalized cities required financial compensation. Most of these expenses had been paid out of the already insufficient war chest which Marcus Antonius had earmarked to fund his military campaign. But then into the city of Tarsus had sailed Egypt's Queen Cleopatra. From her luxurious barge she had taunted Antonius with the extravagant wealth of her kingdom. Antonius desired her wealth, while Cleopatra desired no contenders to her throne. For Antonius, eliminating Cleopatra's younger sister Arsinoe and a man named Ptolemy, who claimed to be her brother and first husband, was a worthwhile deed. Cleopatra was the woman who could make his dream come true. With Cleopatra as his benefactor, Antonius would have the means to see his legions properly armed and fed for the long military sojourn into Parthian territory. However, after 2 leisurely months in Alexandria, dedicated to charming the queen with expectations of acquiring her financial support, his wife Fulvia, back in Rome, had presented another encumbrance, suddenly launching a war in Italy and calling for an end to the Triumvirate. Once again, Parthia would have to wait. 3 years later, Publius Ventidius, one of Antonius's generals who had chased the Parthians back across the Euphrates River, had earned for himself the honor of a triumph, while Marcus Antonius, during those parallel years, had been forced to play politics by marrying the sister of Caesar, and later betrothing his eldest son to Caesar's only daughter. And what had Antonius gained for his political marriage? Broken promises from Caesar Divi Filius. After agreeing to send legions to Antonius per the terms of the Brundisium Treaty, Caesar had then antagonized Sextus Pompeius into reinstating his naval blockade of Italy by unceremoniously divorcing the aunt of Pompeius in order to marry a more beautiful woman from an ancient bloodline. And the soldiers that were promised never arrived. Now, following the signing of yet another treaty with Caesar, Antonius found himself once again at the mercy of the Divi Filius' promise to send legions for his Parthian invasion, pending, of course, the defeat of Sextus Pompeius. Even more humiliating for Marcus Antonius was the fact that upon his arrival in Tarentum, one of the divine son's lackeys, Gaius Maecenas, had assaulted him with accusations, completely disrespecting a triumvir of Rome, and demanding that Antonius present to his inferior an impromptu defense in the face of assumptions of his guilt. Yet in the East, Marcus Antonius had fathered twin children, one of whom was slated to be the future bride of Egypt's next king, a king who was the progeny of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, making him Julius Caesar's only one true son by blood. In Italy, Antonius had somehow become little more than an appendage to the clique of Caesar Divi Filius. In Egypt, however, Antonius could expect future notoriety as the father of the bride of the upcoming Ptolemaic Caesarian dynasty. So for what reason did he remain in Italy? There was a queen in Egypt who owed him for having secured her throne against any potential claimants, thereby ensuring a smooth transition of power to the son. It was in the East where Marcus Antonius would find his own rightful clique, his strength, far from the grasp of Caesar's political manipulations. Sometime near the end of the 37 BC year, Marcus Antonius packed up his wife and children and set sail. Having made the decision, it was time to plan his invasion of Parthia in earnest. Italy was not the only source of legions. Leaving behind the 120 ships he had given to his brother-in-law, Antonius sailed, not for Athens, but for Syria, where he could begin building his offense. During the voyage, while on the island of Corcyra, or modern-day Corfu, Marcus Antonius ordered his pregnant wife to take the children and return to her brother in Rome. Antioch during wartime would not be a safe place for her, and in Rome, Octavia could do her part to ensure that her brother's promised legions actually found their way to him in Syria. Abandoning Octavia on the island of Corcyra, Marcus Antonius continued his voyage to Syria. There, he sent word to his allies to commence raising legions. In Galatia, King Broditarius ordered the levying of troops for Marcus Antonius, placing them under the command of his son, Prince Amyntas. In Cappadocia, Antonius's former mistress, Glaphyra, used her influence with her husband, the high priest of Comana, to begin raising troops for the Parthian invasion, a war which might greatly benefit the East, which had been bankrupted by Rome's civil war. To Cleopatra in Egypt, Marcus Antonius dispatched a man from his inner circle, Gaius Fonteius Capito, to formally request the queen's presence and support in Antioch. It was finally time for Marcus Antonius to launch his invasion of Parthia, and for the triumvir's service to Egypt's throne and the continuation of the queen's dynasty. It was time for Cleopatra to pay up.